Hello again, and God be with you. When Bob Hartman wrote these stories, he told stories from the Bible and he introduced characters that he imagined were part of the crowd, and he tells the story from their point of view. Today's story is about the story where Jesus raised a young girl from the dead, and in the process, Jesus got mocked by the mourners because they didn't necessarily believe that he could do that. The story today is from the point of view of a young Greek boy, and we'll see what he says. The story called Hector's version. I didn't even want the grapes. I just wanted to annoy Gad the grump. I wanted to see his red, grumpy face and watch him shake his grumpy fist. So I waited for a second, waving the grapes in the air. And when he finally squeezed himself out from behind his market stall, that's when I bolted. There's this old Greek story about a tortoise and a hare, and I was the hare, zipping between piles of robes and tables of pottery and cartloads of vegetables. I stopped every now and then just to see how far he'd come, but I knew the story, and I wasn't going to end up short of the finish line. So I gave myself plenty of time to get back to our stall, tossing the grapes to some kids along the way. And then I waited. Honestly, a tortoise would have moved faster, and when he finally arrived, I was quietly rearranging our merchandise as if I had been there all along. You stole my grapes, he huffed. You little thief! Don't know what you're talking about, Grump, I shouted. You know very well, he puffed. And don't call me that. And why not? Asked Uncle Zeno, his hand suddenly on my shoulder. You're the grumpiest market trader this side of Jerusalem, which was particularly funny, seeing as Uncle Zeno was not exactly not grumpy. And you're a worthless Greek, grunted Gad. I don't even know why they let you set up your stall here. Because everyone loves a good deal, my uncle grinned. Jews and Greeks alike, not the rubbish you peddle. Well, it was good enough to steal, the grump growled. I don't see any grapes, my uncle replied. So why don't you waddle back to your stall and leave the boy alone? May the Lord God curse you and your boy, Gad grunted as he turned to leave. Oh, I'm quaking in my sandals, mocked Uncle Zeno. Cursed by a god nobody has ever seen, with a name nobody is allowed to say. Then he turned as well and smacked me on the head. What was that for? I moaned. For stealing grapes, he muttered. Then he grinned. And not saving any for me. Xerxes chuckled. He was Uncle Zeno's slave. What are you laughing at? I grunted. The grape does not fall far from the vine, he replied. I scratched my head. Xerxes was always talking in riddles. Uncle Zeno smiled. I think what our Persian friend means is that the odd bit of thievery is part of, or what shall I call it, our family tradition. This I understood. Uncle Zeno could sell anything, but he wasn't always clear where his stock had come from. He would often disappear in the middle of the night, and a whole new range of goods would appear on the stall in the morning. Today it was mostly leather stuff and a few pieces of cheap jewellery. Just then the crowd started buzzing, and Gad the Grump came our way again with an important-looking man and his family. I heard someone in the next stall say gyrus, but it didn't mean anything to me. What I did notice was the man's daughter. Jews and Greeks don't usually get along, so I thought she'd ignore me. But she didn't. She smiled. Don't pay any attention to him, I heard Grump say. The boy's not quite right in the head. Big fat liar. So I smiled back extra hard just to annoy him. He's right, you know, said Uncle Zeno. You're not right in the head. Not if you fancy that Jewish girl. Yuck, I said, annoyed and embarrassed all at the same time. I don't fancy her. She just seems nice, that's all. Well, that's a good thing, he nodded. You see, Greek boys can only marry Jewish boys if they become Jews, too. So? I grunted. So, he chuckled again, that means you have to give up those pork sausages you like so much. Really? Anyway, he continued, you're far too young to be thinking of girls. What are you, 8? I'm not thinking of girls, I insisted. And he's 10, added Xerxes. We've had him 8 years. He was 2 when he came to us. Try to keep up. A slave who can add, sneered Uncle Zeno. What a marvellous asset. I don't know what I'd do without you. I know, Xerxes muttered again. The word disaster comes to mind. Oh, that's right, Uncle Zeno replied. Like the disastrous deal I made for you. What did I give? A couple of blankets and 3 mangy cats. How I miss them! They were like an old married couple, these two. Always fighting, always making up. But I was tired of the argument, so I interrupted, saying, do Jews really not eat pork then? Not at all? My dear Hector, sighed Uncle Zeno, people do the most ridiculous things in the name of their gods. Here we go, sighed Xerxes, rolling his eyes. Yes, yes, Uncle Zeno sighed back. I know it drives you crazy, but the boy must be taught, warned against the nonsense that is at the heart of every religion. In your opinion, muttered Xerxes. In my opinion, Uncle Zeno repeated, exasperated. This from a man who worships Mithra and believes that every living thing sprouted from the bowels of a cow. The belly of a bull, Xerxes answered wearily. Oh, yes, that's much more sensible, Uncle Zeno replied. Well, it's as sensible as what you Greeks believe, said Xerxes. Not this Greek, Uncle Zeno insisted. The less intelligent among my people may still believe that Hermes and Zeus wander down to earth and play tricks on us mere mortals. But anyone with half a brain knows that those are just stories, meant to frighten or entertain or control. And then he looked me straight in the eye. The reality, my boy, is that there are no gods. There's no heaven up there and nothing but earth beneath our feet. We're born, we live, we die. That's the end of it. And in the meantime, he winked as a customer cast an eye on a piece of jewellery. We try to make as much money as we can. Making money was my hope a couple of days later as I sneaked up to the Grump's stall. Uncle Zeno always said that it wasn't how much you could sell something for that counted. It was how much you had to pay for it in the first place. So I thought that if I could steal a few bits from Gad's store, then whatever I sold them for would be profit. I waited until there was a crowd. I waited until he was looking the other way. Or so I thought. because just as I grabbed for a particularly shiny trinket, a fat hand grabbed my wrist. Gotcha, he sneered, and there's no telling what he would have done had some lady not rushed up to him in a panic. Have you heard? She cried. Jairus' daughter, she's dying. Shocked, he released his grip and I pulled free. But I did not run. Jairus? I asked. The one who was with his daughter the other day? Of course, you imbecile, the grub shouted. She's his only child. He's gone to the centre of the town, the lady continued, to ask Jesus to heal her. And then the grub just forgot about me. He picked himself up off his stool and lumbered after the lady. And, keeping my distance, I followed them. I know what Uncle Zena would have said. God's healing power, stupid. But she'd smiled at me, and I guess I just hoped that somehow somebody could make her well. And that didn't seem stupid at all. When we caught up with Jairus, there were loads of people around him, all hurrying somewhere. Where are we going? I asked. To Jairus' house, someone answered, but they're saying it's too late. And sure enough, when the crowd stopped at a big house, someone came rushing forward to meet Jairus. And when he had spoken, Jairus tore his robes and fell to the ground. Everybody around me started shaking their heads and crying. And then, from the front of the crowd, I'd heard people laughing. Not nice laughing, though, sneering, grump laughing. I crept through the crowd, and that's when I found out what the laughing was about. Jesus said she's only sleeping, someone sniggered. Some prophet he turned out to be, joked someone else. The mourners are here, for heaven's sake, sighed another voice. The girl's dead. Uncle Zeno would have had a thing or two to add to that conversation. But I was really sad. The girl was dead, and I never even said hi to her. So I pushed my way out of the crowd and wandered around the back of the side of the house, kicking stones and thinking about what Uncle Zeno had said. How we're born and live and we die. And that's that. And now it didn't seem fair somehow that she'd only lived for a little while. And then I heard something from the top of the house. I stepped back to get a better view and just managed to see the head of somebody in the window. It was Jairus, and standing next to him was another man, who I guess was the Jesus that everyone had been laughing about. He was smiling, which seemed strange. And then his head disappeared as if he was bending down. And the next thing I knew, there was another head in the window. The girl, alive, with her arms wrapped around her father's neck. And he was crying, and she was crying, and I think I was crying too. She looked out the window. She looked right at me, and I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, and I waved. And she waved back. And then I ran. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't want her to see me crying, or because I just didn't know what else to do. But Uncle Zeno knew, or at least he had a theory once I told him what had happened. It's very clear to me, he grinned, that you ran, my boy, because you suddenly remembered that doing anything else could be very bad news for your pork intake. I didn't think that was the case, but I laughed anyway. And Xerxes laughed too. And then he looked very seriously at Uncle Zeno and asked, do you doubt the power of God now? And Uncle Zeno just kept grinning. I have no doubts, he began. No doubts that this Jesus made a very lucky guess. The girl was obviously just sleeping, and he woke her up. Doesn't take a god to do that. but I wasn't so sure. Maybe not, I thought, but maybe, just maybe, well, it didn't seem like the right time to get into that. And besides, Gad the Grump would still be on the other side of town, which meant that it was the perfect time to help myself to a little more of his merchandise. Well, that was Hector's story. Hector, I think, had quite a long way to go. Had to learn not to go stealing from other people, anyway. But clearly, he was thinking that maybe there was something in what Jesus could do. Maybe there was something in Jesus. We won't know because it's a made up story. But till the next time, God be with you.